I was raised as an only child with two people who basically hated each other just enough to stay together. So I guess you could say I've been mediating since well before I was born. Years before I heard the term mutually assured destruction, I was very familiar with it growing up in that house.
Mason Francis Skiles, 45 years old. 10 years ago, he was deputy chief of mission here, until his wife was killed.
He's damaged goods, but he's manageable.
Happy birthday to me! You are unwrapping a brand new episode of The Film Board from The Next Reel on rashpixel.fm. We spoil movies, and tonight we're taking a huge trip in both time and space to 70s and 80s era Morocco, but functionally remastered to represent Lebanon at one of the darkest times in its history in the new film Beirut, released in theaters this past Wednesday, April 11th. My name is JJ, and I want to start by introducing you to all our wonderful hosts. We have a very nice, happy group tonight. Say hello to the people. Pete Wright.
Hello, people.
Say hello, Tommy Handsome.
Fine Beirut to all of you.
And how are you, Steve Sarmento?
You know, sometimes being in the film board is sort of like being in an apartment without a landlord. You've got all these people from different places, and the rules just don't exist.
Oh, that's a metaphor. Well, before we get started, I want to let you all know out there in podcast land that you can get more details on this show and all of its sibling shows at thenextreel.com. Find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at thenextreel. However, the key way to connect with us is on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/thenextreel, where by signing up to support us with as little as just $1 per month, you can get access to our show's Discord channel. It's very lively and topical over there, and we just launched a new way to engage us with a pre-show Battle Royale chat room discussion on our live channel over there on Discord. It was really cool. So Discord, we found to be really a blast. It's fun and interesting, and we're continually having happy debates, and you'll find that the clever banter you hear here becomes ever more interactive and personal with your subscription to Patreon there. So get on board. Again, it's patreon.com/thenextreel. Okay, Beirut, I wasn't joking about it being my birthday today. It's actually my birthday. So let's get into initial thoughts.
Happy
Thank
birthday!
you. Thanks. Let's get into initial thoughts right away by making it all about me. Describe the present that comes from us selecting a movie eliciting this headline on Collider. Spy thrillers don't get blander than this. All right, who's first? Steve Sarmento.
JJ, for your birthday, I'm giving you 3 glasses of bourbon.
Oh.
One for the past you're trying to forget, one to get you through the challenges you're currently facing, and one for the celebration you have once you're going to get on the other side of the obstacles you're going to face in this discussion, because I think you're going to find yourself all alone there in Beirut.
Ooh.
I like that. It gives me a little bit of a A-Team vibe to that, too. This is for the victory dance at the end. Okay, Tommy Handsome, how did you feel about the movie?
For you, I got you another ticket for Beirut, but not the movie. It's a one-way ticket to Beirut. So good luck with that, because it seems like a real charming place.
It's really interesting that you bring that up, because a lot of the criticism of the film is that Beirut is kind of charming right now, and a lot different than it was in 1982, for example. But anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, Pete, what did you think?
Well, first of all, I'm going to get you. I actually have secured for you a beautiful dish of hummus and some olives and some peppers.
I like hummus.
Unfortunately, it's soured. It's quite old and has been sitting outside. And I feel like you can do with it what you please. But it's
Okay.
called karma. It's cinematic karma. You should feel better about this, and you can have your stale hummus. No, I actually enjoyed it too, and I found myself just a little bit maybe unnaturally defensive because I have such a crush on John Hamm. But I'm with Tommy. I actually enjoyed this movie. I had a good time. I do have some challenges with it. I think there's a bit of sloppiness in the script that I need help with, and I think you guys are just the right people to help me out.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm not sure exactly where we should start based on that, but let's go back to Steve. So you think that that we're going to have this conversation, and I'm going to change my opinion a little bit, and I think that's fine. The reason why I brought up the Collider theme here is because I found the story to be very bland. I think earlier this morning I mentioned it as the white bread of spy thrillers. I didn't find too much of an emotional connection to what it is, but I think that you have some interesting points to bring up about the depth of the story and where really they were trying to take us with Mason Skiles and what he was going through in his life. So talk about that a little bit. Where was your emotional connection to the story, Steve?
Well, I think the key piece comes from everything that happens in our opening scene, which is in 1972. We get introduced to a lot of important people, characters, and a lot of important story information, because we see John Hamm, Mason Skiles, here at his house hosting an event, and we get a lot of snippets of conversation, and we get he describes again sort of Beirut. He uses the metaphor of sort of the apartment complex without the landlord, and talking about people from different countries being there. And now you've got the PLO coming in that wants to be in there, and their whole point of being there, what they're trying to accomplish. So we get the political climate there, but then we also learn about his wife, this sort of young boy that they're trying to adopt, and how important he is to their family. And then we get introduced to his friend Cal, who is there now to take the boy in because his brother is a very important terrorist. And they've got evidence that this young boy who's 13 has been meeting with his older brother. So we've got all these different pieces that come together. And I thought, okay, this is giving me everything I need to know. I trust Tony Gilroy as a story writer, story creator, and I thought he's given me everything. And as everything plays out there, and then we leap ahead 10 years, I thought, okay, now I know what this story is about. We've got different issues that he has to deal with, or we understand what trauma that he will be dealing with in the story, because if we're going to give us all that information, and I'm going to trust who's telling the story, I know that this is all important information. This isn't just exposition for exposition's sake. I'm getting important information. And so for me, I was intrigued with, what is the redemption story for Mason that we're going to get? So I took this as, I set aside politics as setting and not the focus of the story, but I'm going to focus on, how do we redeem Mason as a man? How do we take him from where he was, as we see in 1972, to the depths he is in 92, and what level can we get him back to? How do we redeem him as a man? How do we get him past his grief? That's where I connected with this story. Everything else to me is set dressing, and I don't get sucked into discussions about politics and portrayals of different groups, because to me, that's all set dressing for a story. This isn't a story like The Post or Bridge of Spies, where we're taking true events to try to reflect on what is going on today to give us information. What do we learn from the past? This is a story about a man that happens to be set in this. It's all side dressing.
Yeah.
So that's the approach that I took to this film.
And that's interesting. I think that that's a good point. For me, when we talk about that, especially the stuff that's happening in 1972, you talk about it didn't feel like exposition for exposition's sake. Especially when talking about the relationships that were developed there, is talking about the key relationship between Mason and Kareem, his kind of adopted son. I felt that in that place, which ultimately becomes one of the key relationships going on in the story, that there was a lot of telling that he's part of the family, as opposed to showing us how they react together. The most emotional part of the film for me was him dealing with the death of his wife. And after that, I kind of went on his ride through alcoholism and dissociation. But beyond that, I think it's interesting that the city was set dressing for you, especially because that's the title of the film, and the fact that you were able to divorce yourself from the sort of the political things that are out there. Tommy, in your intro, I was mentioning that some of the criticism of this particular film was that it's not representative of Beirut today. So it's a fictional story that's written for old Beirut. What's the purpose in telling this story and setting it there and calling it Beirut, do you think?
I think because it shows, for me, the city is more than set dressing. It's also a movie about, granted, it does not comment on where Beirut is today, but a lot of this kind of stuff is cyclical, especially America's involvement in the Middle East, America's involvement with other countries, trying to put our motives, our ideals on other countries. I mean, a lot of what Beirut was for me, especially, in its relation to the opening that Steve was talking about, a lot of it is a ghost story. I mean, they set up a beautiful Beirut. They set up a beautiful family. They set up a America with ideals, and they seem to be on top of it. We know we're so smug about it that we have this, we can boil it all down to an apartment building. Here's where we're going. Let's hold hands. And then after, it's how many years later is it after the jump? Doesn't
10
really
years.
matter.
About 10, approximately
About 10.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to around 1982, everything that has been set up, everything that we have seen is gone.
Right.
And has been changed. Mason Skiles. Mason Skiles. That's a great screenwriter name. Mason Skiles is a shell of a man haunted by his past. The young boy that we met and were, yes, told to fall in love with, but I was fine with that. I was like, you've given me enough to care about him. He is now completely changed by the time we go back to him. Beirut itself has been gutted. And I don't think that just because it doesn't talk about where it is today, that doesn't mean that this isn't a story worth telling. It's a ghost story and it's still a warning.
So why? So I guess that makes sense, and I don't know that the debate about whether it's a story worth telling is important. But what is the reason? I guess saying what is this? What is the story saying?
In the best laid plans of men, of mice and men. Wait, what is the phrase? It's best laid plans of mice and men. Sailors take warning, right?
There be
Is anyone
monsters
listening?
here.
Okay, anyways. Yeah, that's it. No, I think it's another one of those it's a slice of history that shows how an invading force that doesn't understand what they are dealing with thinks that they know the best and are trying to force their own ideals or try to set up agreement where there can't be one, not really understanding everything on the ground and all of the particulars and complicated involvement. We go through that daily. We go through that right now. And so I think having this kind of a slice of life, the past story is very worth going over, because everyone in this movie, for the most part, I understand their motivations. It makes sense. There's not like in Marvel, there's not a supervillain that wants to destroy the world. Everyone is trying to save it and trying to do what they can to form the world into their own image, and that can have disastrous results.
Well, and I think that's interesting, and you bring up the cyclical nature of the, really the war that's overtaken that region of the world through the years that we're talking about. I would say even from the 1975 is when the Lebanese civil war began, and then you have until today, and there's still war ravaging in the region. It's interesting if you point at that as the cyclical nature, but I think that my sort of feeling about it is when we usually talk about stories worth telling, we're usually talking about things that were based on true stories. So I think that's interesting if we're using the fictional story to tell, to point at that political thing. And potentially that stands in opposition to what Steve was saying about the fact that the political landscape was window dressing to what he saw there. Pete, do you have an opinion about which of those two pieces, if they are separate, maybe they need to be married? How do you feel about that in terms of the environment and the fictional story that we're getting here about Mason Skiles? Which was more important to you, and what matters most with this movie for me?
I didn't have a problem that it wasn't based on like a true story. The motivation of the story for me on reflection really is as the other guys have said, is about using the story, using the setting as a sort of diorama to demonstrate the machinations of politicians and the state, and to demonstrate where the pressure points are in that conflict. And I think that is the interesting part. And we know that Beirut, the city, and that Lebanon, and that this area of the world is just rife with complexity in terms of the political and emotional heart. And I feel like the setting it made good on its promise for me to demonstrate that there are so many things we don't understand, and it's easy to transpose those lessons to today. It's easy to reflect. And that for me, again, this is a mirror movie, right? This is a movie that's holding up a mirror and it's saying, we need you to learn something. And the lesson, or one of the many lessons, is that, this is an example of us sticking our nose in a place that we just can't understand. And we're going to use this fictional setting, but we all really know, we have this sort of shared cultural understanding that this stuff happened, it happens today, and have we really learned anything by way of our experience in it?
See, I'm gonna disagree with you a bit on that, because I don't think this is a mirror movie. Because when I look at mirror movies like that, like I say, Bridge of Spies or The Post, there's a character that's that's learning a lesson about that situation. And I don't think Mason, through his story, learns a lesson. I think he already knows that from the beginning. I think he's aware of the complexity of the situation, and he knows how to navigate that. This isn't a lesson of him coming to the realization that when America gets involved in things in the Middle East, things get messed up and screwed up. I think it's more about his personal story. It's not about a lesson that we should be taking. I think it's more personal about dealing with the grief. For me, one of the strongest points in the story, I think the lesson maybe he learned was about his relationship with Kareem, where at the end there, where, he basically, Kareem's like, you want to know if I was a terrorist? And he's talking about that night in 1972. And he says, I wasn't that day, but I was.
Which was that is just an expert bit of writing. I thought that was beautiful.
In the morning. That was, I think, probably the most powerful delivered line in the film.
Right. And that talks about everything. I think but to me, that's not like, wow, that blew his mind. I never thought about that. I think that's more about the connection between these two men now and trust in their history, rather than a commentary on global politics.
I think there's room in both places, personally.
Sure.
Because I don't think what I actually kind of enjoyed about this movie was, for lack of a better phrase, how grown up I felt it was. And I didn't mind not having an audience surrogate. There isn't really an audience surrogate for this movie. And I appreciated that, because instead I was in a room with the smartest people in the room. And they're already there and figuring things out. I don't think that the lack of an audience surrogate necessarily means that it's not can also be seen as a sign of the times or hold up a mirror for things. I don't know if someone needs to go, now I get it, in order for that. And I know I'm really simplifying what you're saying, Steve. I don't mean to be flippant about it, but I don't know if that's necessarily that if one of those isn't there, that closes off sort of what Pete was saying.
Yeah, and I think just going straight back to the narrative, Steve, I almost feel like you proved my point. Like his lesson was absolutely hidden in the gap, in the 10-year gap where he was grieving over his wife stateside. When he goes back to Beirut and sees what has happened to this place, for me, that was very powerful. His experience of saying, look what we have done. Because the only experience we have on screen with him before is when things are working, right? Things are okay. It's complex, but we can still have dinner parties about it. And now we can't have dinner parties anymore because we have destroyed things through our politics and our weapons and our war. And I think that is a very important lesson in this movie.
And also, like in the labor dispute that he was having in the hotel, if there's two intractable sides, sometimes you can't just come in and say, I mean, the history that is in the Middle East, some of that, it might be impossible to solve.
So you see, so you're saying the change you see in Mason at the end of the film is, wow, I have a deeper understanding of the complexity of this situation than I did 10 years ago?
No, I think we're talking about two different things. I think it's okay to say that the change in Mason can be personal, it can be character. That doesn't take away from the fact that this movie has a message that is about, has a higher calling than just his individual experience.
Okay.
So, and to talk about those two things in particular, that's, I guess, so what I think I want to explain about the criticism that's out there about this film is that if the movie is based on the higher calling, if it's based on the political, set dressing or actually the environment that's there, then I don't think it's okay to have misrepresentations of the Middle East. Then I don't think it's okay to go and shoot Morocco and say that it's Lebanon and Beirut and call the movie Beirut. If that's the ultimate goal of the story, then I think you have to do a better job of politically making things accurate. Now, to the point, I guess, that we want to say is if we go the other direction and we say it's about story, that's where, if we really want to get into the story, that's where it felt a little thin for me. And, I've been impressed with, Steve, your comments about what was going on and your connection with Mason Skiles, because I never really felt that. I similarly didn't feel like he went through a character arc, that there was a big piece of the story there. I thought there was some intrigue, but there wasn't a whole lot of drama there. So ultimately, that's why I think the movie kind of lacked punch for me, is that I think if we do separate those 2 points, and maybe it can be delivered together, but ultimately, I don't know who I'm going to recommend this movie to. Is it going to be the people that want to learn the thing about a political environment and what was going on in Lebanon that leads to today? Or is it the people that want to go see a spy thriller? I think the movie's kind of watered down in both cases. And if you put it the first place, if we start talking about politics and news and accuracy, I think it kind of fails. And I think that's why you're seeing so much criticism about the way that they chose to deliver that message that we're talking about the wars and about the cyclical nature of the things that we keep doing incorrectly in the Middle East.
Are we seeing that much criticism, though? I thought that the reviewers, at least, that their score is pretty high.
This is one of those movies where the reviewers, if you take Rotten Tomatoes, we've been down that road before, but where it ends up as a 47% audience score, 78% critic score.
But that makes sense to me because I think they probably expect it to have some Bourne moments.
Yeah, right. That
some
makes
Bourne
sense.
identity moments is my assumption. Look, when she races up in that car and he sort of runs in, I sort of relaxed back in my seat of, okay, now we're going to have a car chase. And when we didn't, personally, I was thrilled. I was like, good. I want to see these adults keep talking about these smart things. That's just me.
This was more Michael Clayton than Jason Bourne.
Yes, and I love Michael Clayton so much.
I do love Michael Clayton as well. And I think if we want to talk about the story, I think Michael Clayton's a superior story and reveals less. It has much of a more sort of wahoo at the end of it when you're talking about how they reveal the story there. Another movie that I'd compare it to is like Miss Sloane. We did that on Trailer Rewind, where it was the kind of script where it was a story that revealed itself as it went, and there was new information. There was special things to learn as you went through this story that didn't have to do with the external environment. So to answer the questions about the criticism, I'm seeing a lot of criticism, like headlines from the New York Times where it says it was supposed to thrill, instead it offended, stuff like that. So I think ultimately that it is about that external environment. If you think that is the true lesson of the story, then it didn't really do a good job of telling us about Beirut. But I want to go back to my original question is, who are you going to recommend? All you guys like this movie. So who are you going to recommend this movie to?
This is a challenge because you have to know a specific audience. And this is, again, people talk, as Tommy said, this is a smart film, and it's not going to, spoon feed you information. It has people that are already in the know. So there's not a lot of exposition where they're telling each other things that they would already know themselves. So there's no reason for them to explain in dialogue other than for the audience. So this is a challenging one because it does straddle that line. And for me, I'm going to tell people, if you want a smart, adult film about for me, I'm going to approach it from the character side and say, if you're interested in seeing a movie about a man that has been dealing with grief and now is trying to sort of reconcile that by revisiting, sort of like going back home, this is going back home, but in his case, home is Beirut, to resolve some things that have been troubling him for the past 10 years. His life has been on hold. He's been an alcoholic. He's been in a dead-end job. And through what he's able to do through the story, he is able to then grab the reins back on his life. So for me, it's a story of redemption and grief and getting through that. And so I'm going to present it that way and say, that's the type of film that this is. If you're interested in that type of film, go see this. There is historical aspects to it, but it's not about the politics. There are some interesting story points, but for me, I will definitely have people focus on John Hamm.
Everybody should always focus on John Hamm.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think he did a great job. And I think that is another sort of case that this movie is trying to make, which is, and why he took it, that this is a case for John Hamm, movie star. And I think he's building a solid case for that. And I want to see him in more movies like this, more movies that are smart, that don't make all of the action assumptions that, as Tommy brought up. And I think he did just a terrific job. He's definitely the number one reason. If you like John Hamm, you're going to like this movie. I'd like to think.
I think he really carries it. Not that it needs to be carried, but I mean, he is just stellar. This seems like the kind of role that is written just for him, which is great because he can be tough. He's very good at a bunch of things, and a lot of times they sort of string him out as such, and instead to just sort of focus him in because he's so great in the opening and then turn towards Drunky Mick hair flying around. Like he's the grimiest movie star.
There's a
have
lot
in
of
this movie,
sweat in this
and it
movie.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Notable
Yes,
sweat.
it was a very sweaty movie.
I thought the scenes where he was doing his job, right, when he was negotiating and what he's known to be the expert for, I thought his performance in those scenes was spectacular. He was perfect in the way that he did that. When he was taking on a negotiation and then appropriately distanced himself emotionally from what he was negotiating, I mean, that kind of stuff was really great. I thought that performance was excellent. I didn't really have the emotional adventure that Steve had on this movie, but I agree. I think if you like John Hamm, you're going to want to see this movie in that respect.
Agreed.
So Rosamund Pike, that's Sandy Crowder. That's the skirt that they bring in to tempt him so that he can actually come and join the CIA on their thing. What'd you think about her?
Sometimes in movies like this, I would say the Bourne Identity movies, sometimes especially James Bond movies, have thrown certain actresses into roles where I guess probably the biggest one is, what's her name from Wild Things, playing the rocket scientist. I don't have any of the proper nouns that I need.
You mean Denise Richards as Dr. Christmas Jones?
That's the one.
Christmas Jones.
Denise Richards as Dr. Christmas Jones. If I have a child, I'm a daughter, I'm naming her that. That's her whole name. is Denise Richards as Dr. Christmas Jones. The third. That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
The third.
I really like it. Weird, right? I'll figure it out. It's 2018. I like that she played the role very grounded. I like that they, until the regrettable, very, very, very last couple shots, they didn't try to play up any kind of a love angle with them. She seemed very competent. She seemed like she belonged in the room versus just who gave this supermodel a headset and is doing this. I mean, she seemed great. With that being said, I still think that John Hamm gets beat up with sweat and grime and hair stuff and all this throughout the movie. She does not.
Yeah.
No.
She kind of looks the same throughout the movie. I think we can really just let these actresses put on hats, have some grime, have some stuff. I just have to assume that is, maybe I'm being cynical about it, but I just have to assume that's you can't mess up. I mean, they call her the skirt, but I just wonder if the studio is also like, you can't mess up the pretty girl in the movie, because she looks like no one else in the movie. That being said, I liked her in this role. A lot of times she comes off sometimes as a little cold or a little icy for me. And in this, I thought she showed some very different parts to her. I liked her a lot in this movie.
Can we talk about what they did with the romance thing at the end?
Ugh.
That was so gross. He figures out that she has a relationship with Cal, right? And then they have that embrace when they catch after being kidnapped and stuff. So that it that sets up that actually validates. So why is he hitting on her at the end?
I don't take it that way.
Okay.
I take that as, here's the guy that has disconnected himself from the world, that now has gone through this, is now ready to now re-engage and reconnect. And I don't see it as he's hitting on her. I see it as, because to me, it's always been a very professional relationship between the two, that it's now like, okay, instead of hanging out in the bar and just drinking by myself, I'm ready to go out and have a conversation with the person. I'm ready to engage socially with people in a way that he has not been doing for the past 10 years, because he's now resolved his grief. He's now over and past the death of his wife and can now have a professional relationship with a woman. That's how I take it.
I do too, and I think she actually set it up, well. It's set up well in the script that, she had a relationship with Cal, but it was not the kind of relationship you think it is, right? And I think that was smart, and I think it was, it was sort of empowering of her saying, "Yeah, we had a relationship, and it meant for me the same that it meant for him, and it's just there was a hole in our lives we needed to fill, and it turns out it was each other for a time." And I didn't feel like it was overly sentimental. I didn't feel like it was a thing that was motivating her above and beyond her duty to rescue him. I felt like she was part of the rescue process because it was the right thing to do, and she was a beacon of this sort of alternate reality that she was experiencing at the office. Those guys were doing the wrong thing, and she was the right thing, and it happened regardless of her experience with their quote relationship. And I thought that was actually handled well.
Oh, I thought that was handled well. I had problem with the John Hamm Rosamund Pike. And
Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's what I mean. Like, at the end, when they finally, when he and she have that conversation, I'm more in line, I think, with Steve that it was him reaching out to the world, and she was a vessel of him just sort of needing to recontact after this experience. He needs to re-engage. And
yeah, and I actually agree with you guys in that. That's a problem with the receiver, the audience member, namely me, as opposed to the content there, because that's taking a leap that might not be there. And if you interpret it differently, that's fine. I think that for me, everything that you're talking about, Pete, is really interesting too, because I have a problem when I approach movies like this about spies, in that I look at them very similar to a movie like The Game, where at some point in the movie The Game, I stop believing anything is real. So when she's explaining, for example, well, yeah, I had a relationship with him, but I didn't love him. She said it like multiple times. It was nothing, like all this stuff. I'm like, oh, she's lying. And then as they go on, like I think everyone is lying because they're all spies. And that's my problem. And when I watch things like this, I'm like, if I find nothing to believe in, how can I choose who is the appropriate people to believe?
yeah, I hear that, especially because it's her. And in fact, she has been involved not just in that movie, but also in, Gone Girl, where she's like everything out of her mouth was a lie.
We can't talk about Gone Girl. That's the book that sent me into therapy.
Yeah,
so,
that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
I think it's the scene with Cal when Mason is finally taken it to talk to Cal, and he's got 1 minute, and he's got to get Cal up to speed, and they're going to talk in code. And I think that's, for me, the key point where the veil is drawn back as far as who can we trust and who can we not trust. Because we know that there is a longstanding friendship between Mason and Cal, and business got in the way, and things ended badly between the two of them. But I think there was enough set up to say that Cal is going to speak truth to Mason at that point. And so when he says, I'm more comfortable in a crowd, the sandy beaches, that's telling the audience, we take her at her word. And she is going to be.
And that's so awesome that you did that. See, the problem with my negative mind when I've gone this far into it is that I literally think Cal is telling Mason, you can trust her because I've manipulated her so far that she'll do whatever I tell her.
Oh my goodness.
She'll do anything.
JJ, you're like your own double agent.
Exactly. I can't handle this sort of deception in film. Anyway.
I did think it was so lucky that her name was Sandy Crowder and the other guy's name was Gaines. Because, what if their boss was named Steve Xylophone? How would they have that cool code conversation? Like, if you had, what's your favorite percussive?
So let's talk about those guys. Who was the person that played Steve Xylophone? Well, we've got these other guys there. Mark Pellegrino, Dean Norris, Shea Wiggum. These are the people we're talking about. Mark Pellegrino is Cal. What'd you think of him?
Well, I'm a big fan of Mark Pellegrino. I think he's fantastic. And he is also one of those faces, that, he's been around a long, long time. He's doing a lot of TV right now, with, Supernatural, and he was on Quantico, and he did 13 Reasons Why.
Lost.
And Lost, absolutely. So, he's a big TV guy, but it was just great to see him here. He's got just a boatload of credits, 127 credits. He was, go back to his films, Mulholland Drive. He was in Mulholland Drive, Big Lebowski, Capote. So I like him.
So moving on, then we got Gaines, or maybe that's Steve Xylophone. How do you feel about Dean Norris playing Donald Gaines?
I spent 2 hours trying to figure out, why do I know this face? And then I realized, that hair is throwing me off. That's why I can't place this face.
Yeah.
Yes. No, Dean Norris was great. The casting of this, they cast faces that just helped contribute to that feeling of that era. There was something about these guys that just felt like, that's Washington, D.C. in the late 70s, early 80s. That's who these guys are.
It was a character actor bonanza. Shea Wiggum as Gary Ruzak. I think Ruzak gets as close as possible to Xylophone. If Cal had to say Ruzak, what's the code for Ruzak? What'd you guys think of Shea Wiggum?
I like him as an actor, and I think he did a fine job with the part, but he is sort of central to where things start to fall apart for me. And I kind of want to pivot here to our next reel 5-star cutoff, because I'm curious what you guys think of when this film becomes not a 5-star film for you. And I recognize it may be something that Andy and I are thinking about more than you guys. We haven't really talked about that all that much, but that's what we're talking about here. At some point in the film, we assume that it starts as a 5-star film, and that at some point it becomes not a 5-star film for you. And I'm curious where you think that is. Can we diverge a little bit?
So you start out movies thinking that they're 5 stars from the get-go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think Pete and I have been part of this conversation as well. As where, at what point, if you're sitting next to Pete in the movie, do you just suddenly hear "bing" and that
the star
has
is
dropped
falling
off?
off. That's right.
So you start off with an empty bucket, and it's got to earn its way up to 5 stars.
Exactly.
Whereas we go in like I'm going to give you 5 stars, and those are your stars to lose.
There's somebody for JJ. There's always somebody behind him whipping him with a thatch branch, and at some point during the movie they'll stop, and that's when it becomes a good movie.
Yes, I'm like, oh, this is what I was waiting for.
Because JJ also assumes that person is a spy.
Right, see,
named Xylophone. So what do you think? When does this movie start to break down?
So for me, it was near the end when we're at the hostage exchange, and they've just released Cal, and Mason's being kept there till the brother can come over. And I thought, okay, where does this story go? Everything's resolved. Where are we going? What's going on? And then we get, there's a secret sniper. And I thought, okay, now I'm interested, because who is that? Which side are they on? Who are they going after? And I wanted that maybe a little bit earlier because I felt like the tension started to wane. And I thought, okay, now we're into denouement, and okay, we're done. But it didn't feel like the right time for that. And I felt like it lost a little bit of that. And so for me, that's where I felt a star disappear, because there was such great tension going into that, and it deflated for a moment. I thought all they needed to do was introduce that a little bit earlier. And I love how that played out when I realized who's been going on behind the scenes of watching everything play out and say, okay, what's our moment? What's to our advantage to just reach in and do what we need to do. Thought, well played. I just wanted that revealed to the audience a little bit earlier, maybe 30 seconds earlier.
The idea of a Chekhov's gun to know that there's something else in play and we don't know what it is yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Tommy, what do you think?
I'm not good at this question yet.
Okay.
I know that you brought this up to me before. I have trouble figuring out, because I don't go into movies as 5 stars, and I don't know. I mean, this movie sort of floated along as a 4-star the entire time for me. So I'm just not sure how to answer that question. I'm sorry.
So the concept of the question is interesting to me too, as you approach movies, because we were making jokes about how I'm, saying impress me movie when I go in there. But I think it's not too strange to say. I mean, we see the volume of movies that I want to go in, and we talked about the definition of what's a good action movie for us. I want a fair amount of wows. I want a fair amount of things that I can point back to and go, that's when it became special for me. So it's the opposite for me, in that I'm really looking for something special from a film. And to that point, when I went to this movie, and when we talk about, it floating along, there never was that really special moment for me in this movie. So I think I want to turn your question on its head a little bit, Pete, and say, I get why it was maybe a 5-star movie for you as you're coming into it, and these places where it might have broken down. If you were to potentially look at it from a different way, at what point did it really spike up?
Yeah, no, that's the problem. I can't look at it that way, because for me, the movie was great. It was a movie I really enjoyed until we get to a certain point. And it's sort of around Shea Wiggum and his response to handling the belt, the tracker of the belt. And that's when I felt the stars starting to fade, because it on one hand, it felt like there were too many maniacal spies. I didn't need both Shea Wiggum and Dean Norris. And they started sort of, their machinations started getting tied up. And I stopped being able to track, which party was had the reins, and some of that is good. Like some of that confusion is representative of the theme.
It's appropriate,
but boy, did I have trouble at the climax of the film, at the big handover. Again, introducing the sniper and figuring out who was the sniper. Was the sniper PLO, but sent by the Israelis because they were, he was disappeared at the end by the Israelis, but I think he was PLO.
Wasn't it the guy? So wasn't it actually a reveal of the guy who was Mason's handler?
His handler, right?
But
I thought he was PLO.
And he was employed by the Israelis.
Okay,
I mean that's how
he
I
was working for Israel.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, both that and the.
It's done very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But when that guy that represents Israel is like, great job, Magoo.
Yeah.
And so I
Right,
was like,
because there were
okay.
two spies. Because we had the mistress of the PLO guy that they go into his house, and then the driver.
They're all lying.
Those two.
They're all lying. They're all spies.
Yeah.
Don't
That
trust
Israel was fine to go along with all this, but they couldn't allow, as they said in the room, they could not allow that man to go back out free.
Right. Now,
Because of what he'd done and what he could do. Right.
How did they know where this handoff was taking place?
Spies.
There was another belt under the belt.
The belt's belt?
Yeah.
I mean, I asked this legitimately, and this was a question that Andy is not here. He actually posed the same question. How did the assassin know where this was going on? And that gets to my question about the 5-star cutoff, right? It's when these kinds of questions are not able to be sustained in a spy movie like this that it falls apart for me. And that is the problem I have with it. I don't have a problem with the setting or the characterization or anything else, but it's tying up these loose ends in a way that makes sense that makes sense and make me want to keep following. And by the end, and the assassin, I get the motivation of wanting to not let this guy go free. Totally get that. But not being able to track and not having a clear answer to the question, how are all these parties there when they've made such a strong case that they had no idea where they were, that they didn't have this triangulated signal?
And it feels inconsistent, right? Because everything leading up to that point, we were a party to that information. I think if it was that kind of story throughout, where people showed up because we had the leap that there was enough intelligence in Beirut at the time that things were being tracked with the belt on the belt. If we had that belief at that point, that would have been fine. But we had been seeing all of the stuff behind the curtain up to that point. So instead, it feels a little bit like a logic leap to have them show up there at the last minute.
That's a great way to put it. You're right. Yeah.
And maybe the reason why they do that, or maybe the reason why they show that that's possible, is by revealing that Mason's handler and the PLO mistress were spies. And that's supposed to be the big wahoo of us. Oh my gosh, they're everywhere. So they know everything. Maybe that was the justification of it. But in general, I understand that.
I think that's honestly how I took it.
Yeah.
And I let that wash over me. I was enough of like, oh, it was the caretaker of the old museum, and then I was fine.
Right.
It was enough of a Scooby-Doo moment for me. Yeah.
If it weren't for you lousy kids.
Yeah.
I also want us to point back to Idir Chender. He was the grown-up Kareem. In general, he had some interesting stuff to do because he had really conflicted emotions throughout. How did you guys feel like he portrayed this interesting character?
I thought he humanized a character and made him believable and understandable in a very, very short amount of time. I thought the writing was really good for him, but also we brought up that line about when did you turn into a terrorist? But I found he's one of the reasons that for me it kept the movie from being bad guys, good guys.
Right.
That there were really no real good guys, bad is it's pretty bad to do what you're doing,
Subjective.
but at least it's subjective and they have reasons for why they're doing it.
Yeah.
You can, and they're complex reasons,
yes.
Which I think the dynamic of their relationship, which is, for Mason, it was like this was his son who, when Kareem's brother, basically extricates him from the house, results in, Mason's wife dying. So I can see how Mason is going to hold Kareem sort of like that guilt. It's like, you're responsible for the death of my wife, for your surrogate mother. That's on you and your brother. And then, for Kareem, like, his older brother, and being a 13-year-old and sort of looking up to your older brother and wanting to keep your family safe, and knowing that, Mason was in a position possibly to just turn him over to the United States government, and feeling both of them feeling betrayed by each other, and then being, brought together 10 years later. To me, the performance captured that dynamic very well, the complexities of what's going on. So it's not just, I'm the good guy, I'm the evil, bad terrorist, and I'm unpredictable. There was a nice give and take back and forth between the two of them that made it not easy to resolve and to negotiate with each other, that I appreciate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, in fact, for me, he was the other standout performance in this film, and I feel like it was underwritten in many areas. I wanted more of them trying to find a way to resolve the gap between them as adults, like with him as an adult, because you could tell. I mean, he just played the heart so well, that the conflict that he was feeling, but also the desire to get his brother back and to continue his fight. And I just feel like there was room for more. And I felt a little bit betrayed at the climax of the film, that it took an easy way out, and didn't give us, for me, enough of that resolution between,
meaning the sniper or
Ham. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the sniper. It just became like the terrorist handoff and the assassination, and it didn't give me the sort of emotional resolution to what I think is arguably the most important relationship in the film between these two men. So I agree with you about it being underwritten. I think he did a great job conveying the emotion that was there written for him in the film that we saw. But this gets into some of the cultural criticism of what is going on in the film too, because his character has two modes, and that's it. He's either someone who has bought into the American way of life, or he's a terrorist, right? So when people are criticizing the way that we're looking at the people who are living in Lebanon, they're saying that we've devolved their role in the film, or as expressed by this film, as one or the other. You only have those choices. And they have these multiple checkpoints. They have the Christian checkpoints that are militarized. They have the Muslim checkpoints that are militarized. Everyone is either militarized or accepting of the invaders, right? So that's sort of the cultural criticism that's going into this. And then, one thing I'll tell you is definitely don't go to YouTube to find out how people feel about this movie, because there is Lebanese people in particular are really angry with the way that their culture is being portrayed here because of that sort of toggle switch between two modes. And then, we get into the fact that there are no Lebanese actors in the film. And then what you hear a lot when American movies try to take on films with people speaking English in other languages is that this accent has nothing to do with Lebanese. It's not the way that Lebanese people sound when they speak English. So a lot of this stuff, I mean, again, I think he did a great job. I think he had probably some of the most complex emotional things to convey in the film, but I agree with you, Pete, about the fact that I think he was underwritten because we needed to see more of that. We needed even more humanization, Tom. And I think, and I would have liked to have seen it from him because I thought he was a captivating character on screen. When they were in the van together and they were yelling at each other, having this sort of very angry negotiation between the two of them, that was really powerful stuff. And I think both John Hamm and Idir Chender did a great job in those scenes. I totally respect the people who are frustrated with this film for those reasons, and I can't comment on them. I just can't comment. All I can comment on is my experience as a middle-aged white guy who is trying to understand a situation that is wildly complex and that I have not been exposed to enough. And so I feel like I'm not going to go to YouTube and look at the complaints. I'm just not, because I wouldn't be able to engage in a discussion. All I can say is this guy who is French, Idir Chender, did a fantastic job portraying this character, and I wished for more of the character, but everything else, I can't take any ownership of it.
Well, and I think that's an appropriate attitude because we're limited by our own cultural background to see it. But I will say that what those voices are saying is then don't go to this movie to learn. If it's a complex situation, this movie is not going to give you the correct understanding of the complex situation that's there. That's what those voices are saying. But I agree with you. I don't know that we have the appropriate way to.
Well, and as I said from the beginning, I don't think that's what this film set out to do. I don't think this is set out to be an accurate representation of the Middle East conflict. That's not what to me, the purpose of this story is. And I think to try to hold it accountable in that respect is, I mean, you can take things so wildly out of context to say, well, it isn't accurately representing this. Well, that's not what its function is as a piece of art. This is not to hold up a magnifying glass to Middle East conflicts and tensions. And, I did watch, an interview with Tony Gilroy, and they were asking him about this. And he said, well, this is about, Beirut at a time where you had people from in the 70s, people from all different countries and cultures were living there. And this is a story about, American, Israeli, Palestinian conflict and issues, politics in Lebanon. And he said, for those people that have that criticism, he would ask, what would they add to the story to give Lebanon that voice, to introduce Lebanese characters? Because he is focusing on story. And so that's his challenge of, how do I tell a really good story? And this is the type of story he's trying to tell. Now, I guess you can hold them accountable for, well, then don't set it in Beirut. Find another place to set this. But for me, again, it comes down to focusing on the wrong intent. And I know once an artist releases his work into the world, they cease to have any ownership of it at all. But I always try to take, as best I can understand, what is their intent, or what do I see it setting out to accomplish? And I don't see this film setting out to make a statement about Middle East politics.
Well, and that's interesting because remarkably, the script was written, or at least begun, I guess. I don't know when it was completed,
91.
But 1991. Yeah. And he said in an interview as well that it was born out of political discussions that he was having with people while filming The Cutting Edge, which I think is really interesting. Which is
that's the
different kind
figure
of
skater hockey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
DB Sweeney.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's
which is also the story of Beirut.
That's what they should do. Go back and name The Cutting Edge Beirut. Let's talk about production a little bit, guys. So I especially want to hear from you guys about what particular things you found shot well, what things you saw that were really beautiful to you in this movie.
It's sad, but I found the destruction of Beirut when he comes back after his 10-year jaunt away was kind of amazing. His when they put him in the hotel and he looks out the window and the cityscape that he gets is just rubble. I felt that sort of crushing feeling in my chest. Like I was really moved.
And then that reverse shot,
by that,
looking back at him in the window and seeing the holes in the building.
And the bullet holes.
Was a powerful shot
the bullet holes that lead almost to his window. Right. I mean, it was enormously powerful. And I think all credit to production design, and visual effects to make that work and make it reliable. And I say that on the flip side, my God, their drone footage was disastrous with interlaced, and it was just terrible.
Is there anything to be said that maybe it was so bad and it wasn't film? It didn't seem like digital, like high D.
It almost looked like
definition.
It was like a screen cap of Google Maps, like moving across Google Maps.
What I think
thought it looked
archival. I think it was a screenshot of archival footage that then they tried to digitally enhance, and it was real bad.
Yeah, it was jarring.
Like ugly on screen. Like I was thinking, where are my 3D glasses? Am I supposed to be watching this in 3D? Like so
the only overhead drone shot that I recall is when he's being let out of the apartment after just meeting with Alice, and he's on his way down, and the boy hands him the note that says Kareem, and then he follows him through the streets. And then as he's making his way following the boy, we've got an overhead shot. That's the only one I recall.
No, these are all flyovers. These are all like city establishing shots.
There's no one in
them.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not talking the like straight down shot. You're just talking
those
other.
Are fine.
Oh, okay. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are fine. And I don't know why you do that, because what they did show when they showed the scene that you're bringing up, Pete, when they showed Beirut out the hotel window, that didn't look bad.
No, it looked great.
You could do more of that and give the same emotion in a beautiful way. I agree with you on that. Interesting thing, because most of the movie is shot in handheld. I think that this movie taught me that I think I might just be biased against handheld, because in general, it's appropriate in this movie because of the way that we're following people around, where the audience member's eye is supposed to be. It should be somewhat jiggly. It's a very organic storytelling device here. But I was I was distracted by it. It's not shot poorly in that way. I think that in watching this movie, I learned that I'm just biased against seeing that stuff. But in particular, there was a scene at the end in the denouement of the film where when Cal and Mason are embracing, they have something that looks like a setup dolly and the camera's panning
through the fence,
through the fence, and it's all fixed camera, and then abruptly it switches back to the handheld, and it was so. I mean, that kind of stuff. Why pick one? That kind of stuff from a production standpoint really bothered me. So I'm really glad you're bringing up stuff that you did find attractive, because that kind of stuff, I think I'm just biased against it, because I don't, again, when the bomb goes off in 1972 and we run in with Mason to get to his house, the camera goes nuts, right? I mean, like literally it's bouncing all over the place, and that's appropriate for the scene, but I just don't really like that stuff. So I think that's my bias showing there.
I think, yes, I will agree, because I will always, if the camera work takes me out of, becomes so confusing or jarring, or I'm disoriented in a way that I'm not supposed to be disoriented, because I think we've got the bomb going off in 72, we've got the bomb going off when he's speaking, the chaotic, frenetic nature of how it's shot and edited to capture the feeling. For me, it never became a distraction to me at any point in this film. And I think, again, it's your specific background and experience. I've got, friends from college that, when they look, they can't help but notice the costumes and like, oh, well, that's off by a decade.
Right.
And it's, it's their own personal piece. For me, as a general moviegoer without that specific, background knowledge, there was nothing in this that felt too much, jiggly monkey.
Sure.
For me, everything felt appropriate. It was not distracting or disorienting for me.
Good.
Me too. I thought it was very organic and not too fussy. And it did, the handheld did calm down, as some directors don't do when it's two people talking. They'll still like film it like an action scene, and that's when it becomes ridiculous. It did calm down. It just sort of felt like it made me feel almost like I was there, which I appreciate. That's how I like handheld, is make it seem a little bit more realistic. It makes things seem more like you're really there versus watching a set, which is what, of course, you're really doing. And nothing really took me out of it, except for that ending, those very ending. And actually what took me out of it was ironically, JG, was the dolly shot.
Oh, cool. So
that
so you noticed it
more,
too. Gotcha.
Well, that belonged more for me in a Michael Bay movie. I mean, it slid over to the side. I like cutting the frame always, but showing the expanse of that and then cutting the frame on the right with an American flag while two men are hugging.
Oh, God, I hated that so much.
And none of that, and nothing, Brad Anderson and his DP never did anything else like that in the movie.
Yep.
Right. You never saw
I'm very cynical about studio notes and stuff. I wonder if he, just in his coverage, they tried to make it, this is a hard movie, and how are we gonna, we at least want to send people away saying, hooray, I had a good time, so let's Michael Bay it at the very end. Let's use that coverage.
So that's interesting. Good. I'm glad I'm not the only one that noticed that, because I think I am susceptible to what Steve's talking about in terms of that hypersensitivity to it. So
and we should say, I mean, the Brad Anderson, his I don't know, probably his most notable work besides this, because of all the press, is The Machinist with Christian Bale, and there was none of that kind of pandering in that movie. It was a very different tone, but generally, I mean, I'm with you, Tommy. I mean, that rings pretty true.
It belonged to a different film,
right?
And I would think that if we were to ask him, he would say, "Yep, it totally belongs in a different film," and it was not my choice. Is my guess.
Well, I think we've kind of talked about our theater experience and whatnot, and honestly, who we think should go see this movie. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that maybe you guys want to hit in closing?
One thing that might be a off ramp that we can take out, but something that I really enjoyed. It was a mix of both writing and filmmaking. The jump that happens when he's giving that speech and the bomb goes off on the side of the building.
Yeah.
That I thought one of the things that really struck out for me as I was recovering from the jump of that is it was written and delivered so masterfully, because one of the reasons I think it works so well is in that speech he's giving, he delivers the same joke twice in different language, which naturally it's that, so you can imagine how I feel with, it's the equivalent of saying, my wife is mean, so you know how I feel, and my wife is mean. And right when you get to the second mean, when you were naturally just relaxing because you're like, you feel like you're ahead of him. You feel like you're ahead of the movie, and that's when it hits you in the face. I thought that was brilliant. Versus just having a cat jump out of nowhere.
Right.
It could have been in the middle of a sentence, but it really got me. I love that.
So I think that's really good writing as well. I think the content of what was being delivered there is really good. But I will tell you that, Pete, this is another place where they talked about a logic leap. If there are terrorists that are intending to abduct someone with a bomb, and you are hoping that this bomb is going to injure and kill some, but not the people that you want to abduct, including your operative inside, there's no way to do that, actually. To bomb a building and then hope that the people that you want to take from the building are not injured or
Oh, right. It's a
maimed
blunt
or killed.
instrument kind of a conversation, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I get
But some of that
is-
stuff, I mean, but movies,
it's
Yeah,
movies.
but movie-
but
but exactly.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it works. I mean, as long as it's not Russian person holding up something in that last Die Hard movie saying, you prick this and all the radiation goes away.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
insanity. This, for me, I'm willing to look past that because it was so well done.
Cool.
Yeah, I didn't see like casualties, like, dismembered bodies. It seemed like the car was far enough away that it blew a small hole through the wall to be disruptive. I didn't see it like,
It's a lot of
oh, we've got a
coughing
body
and running
count.
around.
Yeah. So it was more to disorient it. I took it as, okay, we're using this as a disruption to distract everyone else so our operative inside can convey the information. And I think it was, to me, as I said, everybody seemed to survive, maybe a little confusion. I didn't see, John Hamm walking over dead bodies. So I would have been more concerned if it was like, oh, okay, so, out of this room of 70 people, these 15 die, and how did they know that wasn't going to be? Because I didn't see, death in that destruction. It was more of a
small
shock of,
targeted
yes.
bomb to destroy the side of the
Yes.
building and not injure or
Yes.
maim or kill anyone. Yep. No, I get that.
Yeah, but I hear you. Yes.
Well, also, I think that we're getting close to the part where we're rank it. Tommy, are you going to sing about Beirut?
Nope.
I didn't think so.
I was just going to do the basic flick chart theme because I started down a couple roads and I was like, Tommy, there's just no reason to do this.
Rein it in.
There's no way to go,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so much criticism.
Yes.
They should, name it Beirut. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so everyone out there, you guys should check out flickchart.com to try out what we're going to do right here. The site provides a fun way to look at movies that you've seen by creating. It's a tournament style stack ranking system, and it organizes movies of your choice as they duke it out for King of the Movie Mountain. So the movies that we've talked about on this show can be seen ranked at flickchart.com/TNR Filmboard. Okay, who's got the keys to the castle?
I'm in it. Up first, number 1, Beirut versus Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Beirut.
Beirut for me.
I was actually going to vote for BVS Dojo.
Really?
The second
Second time.
I've voted for that movie in history.
Wow.
You love that movie.
Yeah.
It's your favorite movie.
No.
Happy birthday.
No.
I better know which way this one's going to go. Beirut versus Demolition.
Demolition.
Demolition. Oh, no. Beirut. I changed my mind. Beirut.
I'm Beirut on this too. I thought this was going to, I thought I was going to lose to Demolition.
Oh.
Fascinating. Okay, now I really know where this one's going to go. Beirut versus Get Out.
Beirut. Just kidding. Get out.
You're fired.
Yeah, get out.
Get out. JJ. Oh, you're abstaining?
I still haven't seen Get Out. I'm still afraid of it.
Okay.
No, Steve no blooper.
What about Beirut versus The Martian?
Oh.
The
The Martian.
I'm The Martian on this one.
Yes, The Martian.
I'll go Beirut. Throw my vote in the fire.
Woohoo.
How about Beirut versus The Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Man from U.N.C.L.E.
I really liked that movie, but it just sort of flew out of my mind. I'm going to have to say Beirut, but I might be wrong.
I will go with Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Uh-oh.
I kind of can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to go with The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Nice.
Yeah. How about, Beirut versus Black Panther?
Black Panther.
Yes.
Beirut. I know.
What?
Wow.
Oh, I'm Black Panther.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, I'm worried. I'm a little worried about it. I'm just a little worried about
Don't
it.
worry
How
about
about Beirut versus Rogue One?
Oh, Tony Gilroy. I'm going to say Rogue One.
I'm Beirut.
I'm Rogue One.
I will say Rogue
Okay.
One.
Coward!
We're all over the place. We're all over the place. It's great.
I love it. That puts Beirut at number 18
Wow.
on our flick chart. That's right
Ooh.
between Fury at 17 and Demolition at 19.
Okay. I feel really good about
I
that.
feel
spot.
terrible about it. I'm really interested to hear what Andy's going to say. But yeah, great.
Now, if we were to go by the algorithm for Beirut, this is what Flickchart says we should be saying in terms of a star rating. It should be 3.5 stars on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. What do you guys think about that?
I will accept that as an opening bid.
I think it makes, I agree with Flickchart for you guys. For me, it's a 2-star film.
Interesting.
And for me, it's a 4, but I'm fine with 3.5.
It was, I'm actually with Tommy. It was a 4 for me too. And so 4 plus 5. Steve, are you going to stick with 3.5?
Yes, I'm going to stick with 3.5 because I know you brought 2 briefcases with 3.9 stars in them. So,
And I am a dislike. I'm a no heart on this movie.
I'm definitely a heart on this movie. That puts us at 3.375 stars.
Perfect.
Rounds back up to 3.5. That's fine. With a heart.
I think people come for the banter, but they stay for the math.
Yeah, no, I think that's settled science, Tommy. Settled science.
So where do we go from here? Next month, it's interesting that we just went with Rogue One because now we're into the second. In May, we're going to do the second of the Star Wars stories, right? So out of the Skywalker saga, we are stepping back in with Solo.
Solo, you can't even hear it.
I have no idea since I've seen no trailers. I don't know what to expect.
Well, but so are you excited?
I tell you, I'm going to walk in with 5 stars and we'll see how many I walk out with.
Do you know who's in it? Are you excited about, do you know anything or is you just like total media?
No, I know the casting.
Okay,
I know the casting and I know there was the change in directors.
Yep.
Yeah, production went off without a hitch.
Yeah, exactly. So I try to walk in. So when I talk about going in with my 5 stars, it's 5 stars for what I expect this type of film to accomplish. I'm not like, oh, it's Solo. Oh, it's this type of film. Like, okay, it's going to be fun. I'm going to put my 14-year-old brain on and I'm going to let loose my inner child and I'm just going to go have fun. And I will see how much fun I have. So, for example, today our family was rewatching Jumanji, the second
new one.
The second one.
Welcome to the jungle.
And my brother's in town. We were talking about it. And he had never seen it. And we're about, 15 minutes in and we're both talking about how this movie is so much better than Ready Player One, that it knows how to have fun. It knows what type of movie it is.
I
It is
100% agree with you on that. 100%.
And so it's like, yeah, I will give that more stars than Ready Player One because it knows what it is. So with Solo, I hope it knows what type of film it is. I know what I usually expect from Ron Howard. So
I'm just super excited for Emilia Clarke, and I love Alden Ehrenreich too. Donald Glover. I'm really excited for the cast. I hope they treat it right too. I agree with you on that. Pete, what are you guys doing on the main show?
I'm very excited about Solo. Childish Gambino and Khaleesi. Are you kidding?
Right?
I'm totally in, and I'm totally and enthusiastically, and
Mother
I
of
was such
Landos.
a fan of Rogue One as a Star Wars story. I like what they're doing with that. I love seeing these kind of prequel stories. I'm okay with all of this. I have let it go. I have totally let it go, and I'm excited until I'm proven wrong. So good for that.
Love that.
Okay, what are we doing?
What are you guys
now?
doing
We're in
on the
middle-
main show? What's your series?
We're in the middle of the brooding James Dean right now. We just talked about East of Eden, and we are moving into Rebel Without a Cause. So as we talked about, if you're a completionist, if you want to just start picking actors or directors to watch all of their catalog, you can't really start any better than James Dean. It's low hanging fruit with 3 movies,
Right.
so it's a good place to start. We had a lot of fun with East of Eden. It's a movie that I wasn't as crazy about it, but I love James Dean in it. He's just amazing to watch. So it was a treat.
Nice. Cool. Well, everybody tune in for that. I'm super excited for the next movie on my list because, Beirut was 2 stars for me. But tonight, I'm just going to relax and love life a little bit for my birthday. So thanks so much for joining me tonight, Pete Wright.
It's a pleasure, JJ. Thank you.
Good night, Tommy Handsome.
A fine Beirut to you.
And sleep well, Steve Sarmento.
Hondo.
Thank you all through the speakers and the earbuds galore for listening here. Come and join us on the interwebs at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And remember, you can also join us for fun, informal chats online by dropping us as little as $1 per month at patreon.com/thenextreel. Once you sign up, we'll meet you on Discord on that golden live channel. Have a great night, y'all. At The Next Reel, when the movie ends, our conversation begins. Till next.
We're all out of love. I'm so lost without you. That's for Tavis.